Yeah.
So, what we do is orchestrate, we architect for that. And so, I am looking forward to these sorts of collaborations where it's not always comfortable, but I need to learn. I mean, once we get it, it's going to be like that. It's going to be like lighting a fire.
The world that we want, where we're just letting people do whatever they want to do, is only possible when we're able to be mature enough inside and manage attachment and seek to be a benefit to the other party, just as we're seeking the benefits that we need from the world.
Yeah, so like in the case of fixing up a house or something like that, every single one of those relationships is a opportunity to build a long-term relationship. And to me, I don't know if you've seen that Robert Luddy presentation at the Mises Institute, but he talks about how long-term thinking is morally correct thinking. And so a lot of us, a lot of the consumer type people are really into a short-term mindset. How do I buy this TV for the lowest cost, or how do I get this service or whatever? And it's the long-term thinking that really changes the morality kind of in people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
And I even spoke to this when I was talking to Dale Brown. He's talking about like how violence affects everybody in a bad way, and so the idea is to just not have violence happen. Even if the criminal is breaking into your house, the better solution is not to shoot him, but to just tell them to drop the stuff and leave, and maybe even tell them, what is the problem? Why are you breaking into my house? And like create the circumstance where there can be a win in every situation. And if we start to see that each interaction that we have is an opportunity for other people to win, that's where most of this bullshit that the fear that we have of each other and of all the things that bad things that can happen from each other is mostly just illusions created in our own minds.
No, that's true. I mean, it seems like so much of what we're doing is really just hacking social mores. I mean, if I the way I think about this, I used to say this when I did the skateboard advocacy. I would say a measure of our success is how little the people in the future give a shit about how hard it was, right? Because if we pull this off, then we talk to kids about it and they'll be like, so, right? So like, what we're doing is trying to architect a change in how people respond to social stimuli. And if we do it successfully, there'll be a point in the future where, we won't necessarily need technology to do it, right? This is how people will work. So that's totally our intent, right? And like, what you're proposing isn't fundamentally radical, except that it is, because that's not how we're educated. We're educated, as you talked about, Michael, to con somebody or to, screw them over or whatever. It's just, yeah, I mean, it's really just as simple as changing social mores, which I think becomes easier as people adopt influence networks that are more local to them. They don't have to tie into the centralized information information sources. The more and more they begin to trust their own circles, the more they can say, well, this is an alternative, and it's not too radical. I could do it. So.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of goes back to the beginning when we were talking about identity and taking charge of the identity. The idea with really formalizing a intentional community of sorts, whether it be in one local area or around the world, a community of people that that can verify each other's identity, can verify each other's reputation, and transact, encourage transactions in all kinds of different forms, is what we're after with this community.
Mm-hmm.
And shoot, I had another point I wanted to hit on, but I don't know. Anybody got any comments on that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going back to the beginning and talking about what people can do like today to help themselves be more secure and feel more free about what they're doing rather than just be afraid. Any suggestions in that regard? Simple things that they can do to protect themselves, protect their privacy.
What do you think, Anam? Seems like your topic.
Okay, well, I would say that because you said, what can people do? That it's a general question, and that's really hard to answer, because what the average person should do is not speed, not drive too fast, not get pulled over, like try to preempt interactions. That's what the average person should do, because for the average person, it may or may not make sense to go through these procedures, you know, to guard their identity, or to, you know, like if you get approached about some kind of scam, I mean, kind of educate yourself on what those look like, I guess. When people call you on the phone asking you for really anything, or saying that they're the IRS or whatever, like, you don't have to interact with that. And as a matter of fact, you may take up kind of a policy that if it's a number you don't recognize, you don't answer the phone, let it go to voicemail, or make them text you or something like that. But if you wanted to make your question more specific and say, you know, what could a certain kind of person do, then the answer would be more specific. Do you have an idea like that in your mind, Michael?
Well, I'm just, you know, our audience is probably primarily anarchist. So to some degree, you know, we're talking to people that are already a little bit enlightened to the system. You know, I mean, something that just occurred to me was like, don't talk to the police. You know, like that's like, don't incriminate yourself is like the simplest solution to a lot of problems that people have when they interact with any kind of authority. Is just don't incriminate yourself.
That should be an obvious one.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I mean,
it's so hard to do. And you know, like, Anam, when you came down here, we went out to lunch. We talked about, you know, like Mexico being different than the United States in a lot of ways, and one in which I was pointing out was that, you know, you can take charge of your own authority. You can say no to people. Like when a policeman here in Mexico comes up, or in Acapulco comes up to you and asks you a question, you can say no, leave me alone, you know, and effectively they will for the most part, you know. And if they kind of insist, you can be insistent as well and say no, thank you.
I think that, yeah, you're right. That is different as to what the procedure would be in both places. But I wouldn't say it's impossible in, like, the United States, for example. It's just that in our current paradigms that we hold in our head that they put there, yeah, it's impossible to resist the police in the United States. But is it really?
yeah, it's considered unwise. But I gave Michael an example yesterday. I think it was yesterday, where, you know, there was a skateboard park outside of Portland, Oregon, where the police had published a sign that said, by entering and remaining within this facility, you consent to search by law enforcement. And so we had worked with a legal advocacy and put together a couple of stickers that said, you know, just sort of in very simple terms, explained to the kids there what their legal constitutional rights were, and then gave them to the kids. They put them on their skateboards. And then informed the media. When the media went there, they got to quote a 15 and a 17-year-old about it, which was devastating in terms of public relations, right, for the city. And they had to rescind their policy. So, you know, there's things that we can do about that. And a lot of it's just education, because most people we're told that it's unwise to do so. And if you know, then there's a weird shame dimension. If you don't have anything to be ashamed of, you know. Then just go ahead and talk to them, because, you know, it'll be okay. I mean, you know, the police are the good guys, which, you know, okay. So, yeah.
Yeah. And there's, you know, so what I'm suggesting is there's There's a lot of different things that people can do. But again, it's like what you say, you've got to start with a goal in mind.
Yeah. I think you want to hear
That's-
specifics. And I would say that somebody who's concerned about privacy should do some simple things. Here's a couple simple things you could do. Adopt different names for different roles.
I agree with that one wholeheartedly.
If you were born with a crazy name like I was, it might sound like a terrorist name. It's not too easy to deal with for contracts and all that, right? So you might go and make yourself a more basic sounding name to do business in. And you could even like legally change your name to something that sounds very basic so that you're, traveling across borders is easier, signing contracts, dealing with, local authorities if you have the misfortune to have to do that. That would be one thing you can do. And I think, I don't know what it is now, but at some point in the past, it was about $75 to legally change your name. So you could do that, but you could also just make up names. In the anarchist community, we know that there's like a tendency for people that want to be in the public sphere to adopt names of famous anarchists from the past. Someone might adopt the last name Mises, or Lysander Spooner, or like all these different heroes from the past that you can like use their name as kind of a name just to use for this role of public speaking, right? So like you could start to like diverge your public life from your private life. Another thing you could do is don't have your home address on your government documents. That's stupid. Like, who's most likely going to be causing you problems? It's either real criminals who are just breaking into your house, or it's official criminals who are going to come to your house because you gave them the location where you'll be asleep and defenseless. That's stupid to me, right? Don't have your home address on your government documents, and don't have your own name on your vehicle. You drive that thing around, kind of like advertising, like here I am. And now that police are doing this thing where they drive through parking lots, just scanning everybody's license plates to see who's there and what could they possibly, pull out of that situation. Police are trained to escalate interactions to be like a big ticket or a big bust. And just because that's the reality of the world, it's stupid to have your vehicles registered in your own name.
I have a video. I was actually asked to speak at an event in 2017 called ICS West. It's basically physical security, and I was there to speak about the use of predictive analytics in the future of physical security, right? So anyway, I got to walk the floor of the show, and it's a show for like public/private ubiquitous spying. Basically, I got some really good videos of that. One of the videos I got is just exactly what you just talked about, Anand. It's got a police car there, and it's showing on the video screens the ability for the police car to go through and then automatically scan the license plates and then automatically look up the information for the people. So I'll have to figure out how to share that because it's on my phone, not on my desktop. But anyway, that stuff is not science fiction. That stuff is in actually wide scale use right now. And the real topic of the presentation was like, how can private vendors, how can they automatically use predictive analytics to vet those who enter or are around their facilities? And like, the part that offends me is that's basically economic apartheid, right? Like, this is the thing that really got me into skate park advocacy, is that, if you can't afford to be somewhere, they don't want you to be there, right? So, and this plays out in a particularly cruel manner. The more and more people are pushed below the margin of middle class, right? They can't technically afford to be at the open air mall that is exclusively reserved for the rich, right? And so the people that were there are large retailers, and they're interested in how they might be able to use various forms of authentication. One of them that they were interested in is the ability to, if somebody is using their mobile app to purchase things from a retailer, they're able to create what they call a device print, is what they call it. It's device fingerprinting. And so they want to be able to, through geolocation, be able to identify and then therefore qualify those who are within the open air malls. And then those who have been associated with fraud, they want to be able to use their own private security to just ask them to go elsewhere. Well, I mean, it doesn't take much to think through the implications of that, right? That sucks, you know. And I worked for a vendor called iOvation that does this for you know, Citibank, Amazon, and a whole lot of other vendors. Would actively monitor almost 4 billion devices daily, and I was responsible for device fingerprinting. So this is my domain, right? And what people don't realize is that your device serves as a proxy of your identity, and this is using a definition. Is your assumed identity through the lens of a profit-seeking private entity that is working. Oh, here's something you guys probably don't know. These device fingerprinting, these profiles, this is actually stored into a third-party consortium, if you will. So if something goes on at vendor A, that's detected by vendor B and vendor C, right? And so when you're on the back end of that, it's actually pretty interesting because you get to watch criminal activity. Let's say people use fake profiles at porn sites to harvest identification, and then they start establishing low-level commerce identities, and then they basically move all the way up through the value chain. So when you can watch it from the back end, it's pretty interesting, right? But the way this plays out for the normal person is that, let's say that you go to Match.com or eHarmony or whatever. These are actually literal examples. And let's say you dated a couple of people and they didn't like you, so they report your profile. Well, that actually lifts the risk profile of your profile, which is your assumed identity, using the device as a proxy, right? What that means is it's less likely that you will be accepted for a credit card at Amazon or Citibank or others because it's an elevated risk profile. It's less likely you'll get work through Upwork. As another one of the customers of this platform. So what people don't have any visibility to, there's no transparency to how this is used, right? Because you have sort of just walked into an identity metaphor that is created by profit-seeking entities that are trying to reduce risk. What you're doing is that if you go use a Wi-Fi network that other people are using and there happens to be detected risk activity there, then your device has an elevated risk profile. So a lot of people don't know these things. Like, this sucks, but it is what it is, right? So, you know, one thing I would add is that something I learned when I studied computer science, and I had a professor that said, you can't hide, you can only obfuscate. And you do that by leaving in your wake a stream of obfuscated bullshit, which is totally how I roll, right? Like, most of my online profiles are of older Black or Latino women, because in the context of a culture that's obsessed with whiteness, wealth, and youth, the only way to be truly anonymous is to be an old Black woman. And I'm not making that as a statement from a racist perspective. Ironically, that is a reflection of the institutional racism of our society, right? So, you know, if you want to know where I am, I'm basically the old Black woman that's in a group that's talking about Jesus, and it's basically all been invisible. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, most of my I assumed identities, I have my public persona, right, which, as I had said, has just been completely eradicated from Facebook in the last 2 hours. But I've got all these fallback ones that are basically just, you know, invisible brown old people that that are like less than invisible within our society. So that's one of the things that I do on that. Sorry to go long-winded, but it's a passion topic for me.
Interesting ideas.
And I love the obfuscation thing. Actually, I should add to the obfuscation thing is that I come from a long line of pranksters, right? So like my grandma would talk about how to orchestrate a prank during World War II, you know, announcing concerts that were happening at venues that don't actually have concerts. And so, you know, you do that with flyers, right? It's like basically a 1940s era version of a troll. And so, and then in my family, there's like 1,000 stories like this, right? And then my mom had her version, and then of course I have my version. So what's fun about trolling as me is that the more people look into me, the more confused they get, which is like basically the design. So this is sort of like when that professor said, you can't hide, you can only obfuscate. And you do that by leaving an obfuscated wake of bullshit in your wake. I'm pretty good at that, right? So, you know, you'll find that I've put full use of trolling to my advantage for a long time, but it's mixed in with real stuff, and it becomes really hard to distinguish one from the other. It's actually pretty funny because there'll be people that are like, screw this guy, I'm going to figure out who he is, and then he come back 3 hours later like, Jesus, I can't figure out what that was. It's complete nonsense, which just tickles me to no end. But anyway, that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah, disinfo can be fun.
Oh my God, it's really fun. It's really fun when you come from a family that's really good at deadpan delivery of complete bullshit. Like my grandpa came in the house when I was a kid and he had this big salmon. We lived at the Oregon coast. And I'm like, where'd you get that? And he's like, well, I was in the woods and I had my 30-06, you know, and of course we're rapt. We're just completely enraptured with this bullshit story about how he hunted this, you know, this salmon with the 30-06. But he's able to deliver a complete deadpan, right? And so then in the context of modern internet, that's the Poe's law. It's the law of, you know, if you're able to deliver any satire without humor and you do it well, it's indistinguishable from reality, right? So it's just deadpan humor. And I'll tell you what is completely baffled by that approach are linguistic AIs. And I know this because that's my background. In fact, my marketing person, she and I are the co-administrators of the Forensic Linguistics Forum on Facebook, which is the use of linguistics to identify different behaviors, inclusive to the domain of computational forensic linguistics. And I'm telling you, linguistic ambiguity completely kills those AIs. They just do not understand. If humans are confused by deadpan humor, AIs are completely baffled by it. So this is how you can hide in plain sight, by just talking. And this is the cool thing, is it's not that sophisticated. If you're a smart ass, you've been doing this your whole life. It's like somebody made a fart sound in the classroom. By the way, I've got a whoopee cushion for my twin 6-year-olds, right? So if you learn how to make a fart sound and then the teacher says, who did that? And you're like, I can't imagine who would do such a thing because I love math, right? And then everybody laughs, you know what I mean? We've all done that. I'm pretty sure that 99.9% of anarchists are smartass, and they're pretty good at using deadpan delivery to obfuscate their intention within the context, the tapestry of social media. So I would encourage people to just embrace, let your freak flag fly on your bullshit stuff. Because here's the cool thing about this, and I'll stop for a moment. This actually forms a basis of extremely high security multi-factor authentication, right? So let's say that you create a fake profile of a 68-year-old black woman, and then you go knock, knock, knock on your anarchist doorstep, and your friends are like, who's this? And then you basically, in plain sight, you actually share a few basically call and response forms of stuff that could only be known from face-to-face communication, right? And you mix in there the bullshit that you already do as part of your gameplay, right? And they'll be like, oh yeah, that's Kent, totally Kent. It's a classic Kent thing, you know, dinosaurs aren't real, you know, blah, 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 you know, just all that, whatever bullshit it is. And so that actually is what we do for high security, high context multi-factor authentication. And I actually do that with people who are on the streets. You can do that. If you know that somebody every day walks from here to there, you can leave little icons of garbage along their path that they'll pick up and say, that's fucking Kent. Only he would do that, right? And you can do the same thing. This is highly secure, highly sophisticated, and it leverages the high context of your exclusive community in a way that baffles AIs, and it really baffles anybody that's in your wake. And I would just encourage people, you don't have to get too sophisticated, just be a smart ass. It kicks ass. It's really secure. So we could have a whole other session on how to do this. It's like my favorite topic ever.
Yeah.
How to be a troll, basically.
Well, needless to say, yeah, there's a lot of information here, and I want to try and keep this to an hour, and I greatly appreciate your guys' time for participating. One of the things that Kent and myself are working on is in his platform is kind of a couple pilot programs in regard to really developing what I'll call an anarchist toolbox of tools that can be used for people to not just think and create ideas about what to do, but actually do them. And Kent suggests we call it a cookbook, Anarchist Cookbook 2.0.
I think I was kind of tongue-in-cheek on that one, but yeah, let's just go with it. Because I can only imagine the million ways. Because when I first got the Anarchist Cookbook, of course, I lived in rural Oregon, and I was like, all right, now we're going to be anarchists. And then I was like, what, make things blow up? I learned how to do that out of the womb, you know what I'm saying? Like, are you kidding me? If you grow up in rural Oregon, you're born with a rifle, you know what I mean? So the idea, sort of the tongue-in-cheek joke is that if you create you create an anarchist cookbook that actually includes stuff like you're teaching, is that actually becomes potent, you know what I'm saying? Because they're actually common sense concepts that I think humans have been using for hundreds of thousands of years, right? We're only really going back to some simple concepts, and that's what I think makes it truly dangerous and delightful. It's a good troll as far as that's how I see it.
Well, I think a cookbook is a good example, because it is about collecting recipes, and successful recipes that get you what you want. And I think, you know, we have a multitude of people and experts in a lot of different areas. And I think if we combine all those things, we can, you know, we can solve pretty much any problem. And certainly, Anam, you've got a great deal of recipes that I'm not sure if you're willing to share, but if we put that in that kind of context, is that something you'd be interested in contributing to?
I'd be happy to serve in this way.
Yeah, see, the thing is, that's
Awesome.
kick-ass. That's where it gets delightful and dangerous, is if you crowdsource this thing, right? Because if you think about the richness of our network, right? You actually use another example, the people with the float community, they probably have great ideas too. We can't really afford to be exclusive at this point, right? So we stand back to back, we come up with these great ideas, and we actually share some of these things. The stories that you have is like, not only did you actually turn around from a position of, I think, of servant-hearted leadership, you taught others how to do it, but then you built in that they got to share it with others. That's kick-ass and completely counter to how things go. And I'll bet you that there's 100 people that have ideas like that. And that's when things get awesome, right? I'm digging it. I actually think that could become viral.
Well, can you imagine? So here's my vision. You know, this world that we want to make
Mm-hmm.
is one where every interaction serves both parties.
Mm-hmm.
That's what voluntary interaction is, kind of by definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
They willingly want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so every interaction between humans makes, you know, each party's life better and
Mm-hmm.
better and better. And that's the world. The world is like a name for the group of individuals. So individuals that are serving other individuals. This is the only way to make the world better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And being served by it, you know.
I frequently talk about oneness and diversity. We embrace the diversity, and in doing that, we actually get that embrace of the voluntarism that you talked about.
Yeah.
And that's truly radical. But I'm pretty sure that humans were doing this 100,000 years ago. That's the really cool thing about it. Like, we're not asking people to do something completely radical. I bet you they already do it within their social networks, right? So I'm loving it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also creating a tool that we can create the opportunity for them to do transactions in various ways, whether it be bartering or exchanging time versus time banking, or doing cryptocurrency exchanges, or just doing it the normal way, or, you know, what people would call the normal way. Creating a system that can recognize that and also develop a reputation for people,
Mm-hmm.
that they can keep their identity secure in regard to that interaction and those interactions, is really an awesome thing. And I think we have that ability. We can do that. And it's a really exciting time, I think, because as difficult as the situation is, and, you know, I think Kent has a kind of a model, a maturity model, where it starts off with what's the word you use? Shoot. You know, but when people get angry,
Oh, yeah. So
people get upset.
yeah, the background on this, it's outrage. Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll elaborate. Yeah.
There's plenty of outrage out there, and
Right.
outrage is essentially the starting point. And if people are outraged, then those are people that we could probably talk to. You know, is if we can develop a tool set, and we can develop a system, then all we've got to do is look for people that have outrage, and we can kind of start lining them up, because outrage is just step one.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other steps, and once people start to realize that, oh, okay, outrage is step one, but then, you know, there's something that can make that better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that the government does, it's not something that somebody else does on the other side of the planet. It's something we do together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I talked about, I did skateboard advocacy. Like I did my first like city meeting in like 1983 or something, right? When I was like 16, 17 years old. And it was awful, right? It's like a grow up moment, because I had this mistaken belief that the people that were in the city, or the adults, like if I could be sufficiently eloquent, they would be like, oh yeah, because I wanted to say, like, we're not bad. Stop treating us like criminals. We just want a place to skate. And it was brutal. But you just learned that they don't really give a shit about you, right? So it was like a deep, kind of got hit by that hard, and then I just kept trying at it, and we got better and better. You know, we built the Burnside skate park under the Burnside Bridge in Portland illegally. It's actually kind of a cool case study in that, you know, we were able to, it's actually right in the middle of the city. So we had built a 9,000 square foot concrete skate park over the course of 3 years, right under the noses of the city. And by the way, the reason we chose concrete is because we learned in experience after 5 years of failures, we learned that the more you build out of concrete, the more infrastructure they have to requisition to actually pull out. So it became an economic game, actually. The faster we built concrete and the more we could delay their action, the more concrete we would have, which meant that they had to go back for more approval for more equipment. And so we just played their strength against it. It was very Aikido, right? But in the meantime, we negotiated a formal agreement with the neighborhood association, business district, law enforcement, and the city of Portland, and actually it's resolution 1179, formalized in 1991. So the park's still there. It's, you know, it was featured in the Tony Hawk video game and the whole deal. So, you know, it's, you know, every year there's an anniversary party and the police just turn their back to it, and it's complete mayhem. There's people throwing glass bottles while people are skateboarding in there, and there's bands, and there's all kinds of ugliness, and then we basically clean up and leave it cleaner than how we found it. We do our own maintenance, the whole deal. So, so anyway, then I turned around and said, well, let's teach this renegade skate park metaphor to other people. And at the same time, I've been working in industry, and I learned about how we could adopt what is in the industry called a maturity model. How do you grow from, like, you know, this point to this point and actually be able to really evolve your stuff? And so I set up a nonprofit, and I adopted this maturity model of what we call the skate park development process. And the skate park development process enabled us to say, you know, it was a 5-step process, and it began with like vision, and you go to advocacy, blah, blah, blah. And what we found, actually, the creation of this was because I went out and I gathered binders of all the other success stories that people had got when they built a skate park. Like, there was usually a mom that had a binder, and they'd keep their stuff in there. And I went through it, and I read a bunch of them, and I realized they're all following the same process. And so anyway, we put this out. This is in 2001, 2002. We ended up releasing a book. It went through 3 editions. It's actually, the 3rd edition is available online. But the first 2 went through printing, and it got included in like Masters of Urban Planning courses and other things like that. Anyway, what happened was it used to take 5 to 7 years to get a skate park. Now it takes, you know, 18 to 36 months. And so, you know, we increased the number of them and the quality and the whole deal, basically by introducing what's considered a typology. Anyway, so now we're in 2019, and I was like, well, let's just redo that. We know that works. And so I created a 7-level process. I didn't create it. It's a reflection of what people went through. So it includes outrage. It goes, outrage is where people start. And that's where people are. In fact, I would argue that we're in a place of complete contrived and orchestrated bullshit. We just keep ourselves outraged for no reason, without any actual action, right? So as Michael talked about, is in the org model, it's actually 214org.com is where we place this. It's sort of a first attempt to add it to a cookbook, and we're really inviting people to contribute. But the first one is outrage. Embrace the outrage. It's that actually stimulates change, because if you're comfortable, you won't change. So embrace that discomfort, right? So then you go right to advocacy. You got to formulate that into something that allows a cogent message that allows other people to get on board. And then you go into actually go into vision. And then you go into advocacy, which is the building of your basic governance model, which ends up being very voluntarist, right? And then it goes right into fundraising, construction, deployment, and stewardship. So it's the whole process. And so I put out a couple of videos on that are, on our Facebook page, whatever. But, you know, what I'm doing and putting them out there is inviting others to contribute, because, you know, this is just a framework. And the only way it was successful in the context of skate park thing is that others contribute their stories, their anecdotes, and their experiences. So others could see, like, wow, this is not some mysterious thing. I could do this too. That's the point of it. So anyway, that's my summary of the whole thing.
All right, we're running out of time here. So again, appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. You know, I'll let you guys you know, give a final statement if you want, but you know, thank you so much. I'll try and include all that data that we had in the description, as far as referrals and websites and all that kind of stuff. But at the end here, I'll leave it to you guys. Last statements.
No, go ahead. I just made my last statement apparently because it was like 20 minutes long, so I'll let Anam do his.
Well, I would like to just say that it's been a pleasure to meet you and spend time with you here, Kent, and I hope that we are able to meet in real life sometime.
Yeah, me too. No, it's great. I'm like dying to hear more about some of the stuff, especially the agreement you have to incentivize people to pass this on, to pay it forward. I'm fascinated by that. So
Yeah, you've said plenty here to spark my mind. I'm excited to learn more.
well, I would add, this final thing is that what made me, I wasn't a great skateboarder, but what made me a good skater is I refused to skate with people that weren't better than me. And it wasn't that I didn't spend time helping other people, but it created a dynamic where I was basically consistently uncomfortable, right? So, and I like to say, if what you get, the reward you get from being a really good skateboarder is you get to roll down the stairs backwards 75% of the time, which is of course a miserable experience. But if you create this environment of like where you're really bouncing off other people, plus you're adding, you learn by teaching, it actually really accelerates you. So this is why I like to seek relationships with people such as yourself, because you'll see this within my company, people challenge me. It's the only way to make things better. That discomfort is the only stimulus for change. Comfort doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So, what we do is orchestrate, we architect for that. And so, I am looking forward to these sorts of collaborations where it's not always comfortable, but I need to learn. I mean, once we get it, it's going to be like that. It's going to be like lighting a fire, right? So
Absolutely, and that's the thing for the larger community, the people that we're trying to get to, and to build a community of Anarchapulco people is to create those interactions, to see the opportunities that each of us bring to the table through our abilities, our skills, our passions, and and really make those things something that we can work together on, and work together on in a way that we all win, because we're all. This is the beauty of a voluntarist, concept, is we can all win, not win lose, all win. We can grow this pie a lot bigger, and that's what it's all about for me.
no, I'm loving
So
it.
again, thank you guys. I appreciate the time. I'll try and publish this, within a reasonable amount of time. I'm still getting my skills on when it comes to editing video and so forth. But we're getting there.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me on, Michael.